Right, in this video now we're going to be having a look at angles. So first thing we need is our protractor. I think sometimes students and potentially teachers get too het up on deciding which side of the protractor to use, and that's the biggest mistake we see with students, that they've used the wrong side of the protractor. So rather than thinking about which side to use, what I like to get students to do, and is I'm going to use my finger here, but I get them to use their arms. I would want them to indicate what is a right angle. So you get them to use the hands or their arms, and a right angle they will all be confident with looks like that. So they will make their fingers, their hands, their arms into that L shape with a horizontal and a vertical usually. And that's great, because if you can identify a right angle, you can very clearly identify something that is smaller than a right angle and therefore acute, and you can very clearly identify something that is bigger than a right angle and therefore obtuse. And if you can identify an angle that is smaller than 90 degrees, however much smaller is irrelevant, and if you can identify an angle that is larger than 90 degrees, and again, however much larger again is irrelevant, then you shouldn't make a mistake with your protractor. So the reason being, first thing we'd have to do is you might have to measure the size of an angle. And what I'd like students to do, and this is the way I teach it, is firstly, the protractor. This X or T shape or little dot, depending on the type of protractor you need, needs to be on the origin of this angle, the vertex right there, and it needs to be so precise, 2 hands. This baseline here needs to run along one of these lines. It makes sense to use the horizontal. If not, rotate your book. So I'm going to be really careful, because that isn't good enough. There's a gap, that isn't good enough, it's on a slope, it needs to be perfect, otherwise your angle will be out. And if the angle is a bit small, sorry, that's terrible, if the lines are a bit small, the size of the lines have no bearing on the angle whatsoever, what I always tell the students is, just carefully extend the line, because you're not changing the size of an angle, you're just making the lines that created the angle bigger. That will now go nicely through our protractor, especially through these points here. Now, I've taken a few seconds there, really carefully, I was just making tiny adjustments so that you can see on the camera to get it perfect. I'm really happy now that's spot on. I've got that right at the vertex of the angle, and now here I've got 14, 114. If we've estimated this angle, and purely and simply, was it bigger than 90 or less than 90, we can quite clearly see it's acute. It can't possibly be the 140 degree angle, it has to be the 40. If we now just show that technique exactly the same again, but with an obtuse angle, so I'll just move down a bit. So if I draw an obtuse angle, and again, if I have one in my test that's too small to see where that's going through, because I can't tell where that is, it's clearly between these numbers, but I can't tell exactly where. I'm going to extend my line, and really careful to make sure it's straight. However long you want to, but that now will go through my protractor really nicely. I'm going to get this baseline on, I'm going to get this lined up. Now, it's clearly bigger than 90 degrees. It's over a right angle. That was a right angle, and that's clearly gone past the right angle. So it's got to be one of these, not the 40 to 50. So it's between 130 and 140. 130, 130, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is halfway. 136 degrees. Get students to mark on the angle, because whenever you draw an angle, there's always at least another one. So that acute one has a reflex one around the outside. This obtuse one has a reflex one around the outside. There's nothing to say which angle we're indicating until we've drawn the angle in and then measured it. The other skill they have to do then is drawing an angle. So that would be measuring an angle. Drawing one, exactly the same idea. I want them to estimate first. So if we had to draw 10 degrees, we've got 10 here, we've got a 10 here. So the first thing to check is if that's 90, 10 degrees is smaller than 90, it's a lot smaller, so we're going to be making quite a small acute angle. As long as they can recognise it's more than 90, we'll draw a line. One of the reasons we always get students drawing in pencil, I'm using a pencil that stands out better on the camera, is because if they make a mistake, they can rub it out. So, if we're going to start our point there, we're going to put our protractor on here, and we've got the options of 10 over here or 10 over here. Let's say we drew the wrong one, and we drew that 10, we would end up with that angle there, and hopefully the student would see straight away that's a really big obtuse angle. They could rub it out with the rubber, get the pencil again and realise that it needed to be this 10 here. Put a dot where the 10 is, and then just join those up. And if it's too small to mark in, just make it a bit further on, 10 degrees.